Women should stick to getting coffee. Men are meant to be executives. That's how it's always been. How dare a woman like you question me, the CEO? Do you know your place?
Timothy Brooks thundered, his face flushing red with anger as he stood up from behind his mahogany desk. I held my ground despite my racing heart. The morning sunlight streaming through his office windows felt harsh and accusatory, much like his glare. So, I'm not allowed to share my opinion just because I'm a woman? I asked, keeping my voice steady despite my trembling hands.
What? Of course not,
he sneered, circling around his desk like a predator.
Besides, I'm the CEO here. Do you know what happens to people who defy me?
He leaned close to my face, close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne, a smirk twisting his features.
You're fired. F-I-R-E-D, fired.
His laughter echoed through the office as he clutched his stomach, pointing at me like a schoolyard bully. Something snapped inside me at that moment. The weight of all the discrimination, all the belittling comments, all the casual sexism I'd endured crashed down on me. Fine, I shot back, my voice ringing with newfound strength. I don't want to work at a company run by someone like you anyway. Good riddance. I turned on my heel and walked out, my head held high. But inside, my mind was already churning with determination. Being their top sales rep and getting fired like that? Just you wait, Timothy Brooks. I'll make you regret this. My name is Sarah Andrews. For the past 7 years, I'd worked as a sales representative for Workwear Pro, a company specializing in workwear and safety equipment. While we weren't a Fortune 500 corporation, we had built strong relationships with numerous business partners, thanks to our former CEO's progressive management style and clear vision. The industrial safety equipment sector was, and still is, overwhelmingly male-dominated. I can't count the number of times I've walked into a client meeting, only to be met with dismissive looks and condescending comments. I still remember my first week on the job. Walking into a potential client's office, my sales portfolio clutched tightly to my chest. I'd greet them with my brightest smile. Good morning. Thank you for meeting with me today. The response was almost always the same. A dismissive glance, followed by barely concealed disdain.
What's this? They sent a woman? Are you making fun of us?
One particularly gruff factory manager had growled, not even bothering to look at my carefully prepared presentation. No, not at all, I'd explain, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm here as your sales representative to...
Don't make me laugh. What would a woman know about industrial safety equipment? Get out of here. Send a man next time.
These encounters were like paper cuts, individually small, but cumulatively painful. Yet I refused to let their prejudice define me. Instead, I made it my mission to understand our customers better than anyone else. I spent countless hours visiting construction sites, talking to workers about their needs, and taking detailed notes about their complaints and suggestions. When a construction foreman mentioned that the current safety gloves were too bulky for detailed work, I worked with our design team to develop a new line with enhanced grip and flexibility. When warehouse workers complained about their safety boots being uncomfortable during long shifts, I pushed for ergonomic improvements. Slowly but surely, the same clients who had initially dismissed me began to see me differently.
Sarah, you're such a lifesaver,
became a common refrain. One day, a client who had once refused to even look at my business card called me personally to place a rush order.
Thank you so much for understanding exactly what we needed,
he'd said, genuine appreciation in his voice. I'm just glad I could help, I'd responded, feeling a warmth of satisfaction that came from proving my worth through actions rather than words. Before I knew it, I had become the top sales representative in the company. The promotion to manager, the first female manager in Workwear Pro's 30-year history, came as a natural progression of my success. The company was thriving and I was busier than ever. My personal life was flourishing too. I'd met James, my husband, at an industry conference where he'd been representing his engineering firm. He was different from the start, the first person to ask my opinion about the latest safety regulations instead of assuming I was there to serve coffee. We got married 3 years ago, and now have a wonderful 3-year-old daughter, Emily. When I first got married and later became pregnant, I'd been worried about how it would be received in our male-dominated workplace. The thought of taking maternity leave and subsequent parental leave created knots in my stomach. Would they see it as proof that women couldn't handle leadership positions? Would all my hard work be undone by my choice to start a family? But our CEO at the time, Mr. Richardson, had been incredibly supportive.
Sarah,
He'd said during one of our monthly meetings,
especially in this industry, we need women's perspectives. We need leaders who understand the importance of both safety and inclusivity.
he made sure that women could work comfortably in our male-dominated environment, implementing flexible working hours and creating a dedicated nursing room when another female employee became pregnant. Thanks to his progressive policies, I was able to take my maternity and parental leave without any anxiety about my position. I returned to work with renewed enthusiasm and a deeper appreciation for our company's values. Little did I know that everything was about to change. It happened just before my return from parental leave, the announcement that shook our company to its core. We were getting a new CEO. Being on leave, I wasn't privy to all the details about the leadership transition, but I wasn't worried. After all, our former CEO had always demonstrated excellent judgment. I arrived for my first day back with optimism about his new chapter in our company's story. The office was buzzing with activity when I walked in that morning. My colleague, Rachel, practically sprinted across the room to greet me.
"Sarah!"
she exclaimed, pulling me into a tight hug.
"Welcome back! You look amazing!"
"Rachel, it's so good to see you." I hugged her back, realizing how much I'd missed the daily camaraderie of office life. I've missed everyone so much. As we caught up on office gossip and family updates, I noticed an unfamiliar figure striding through the sales department. He was young, probably in his mid-30s, wearing an impeccably tailored suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. "Who's that?" I whispered to Rachel, watching as he barked orders at a junior employee who was scrambling to take notes. Rachel's usually bright expression darkened.
"That's Timothy Brooks, our new CEO. He's Mr. Richardson's son-in-law."
I raised my eyebrows in surprise. He seemed awfully young for a CEO position, but then again, who was I to judge? While I was having these thoughts, Rachel leaned closer, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper.
"But Sarah, I don't really like him, and I don't think I'm the only one."
The severity in her tone caught me off guard. Rachel was usually the office optimist, always finding silver linings in every situation. For her to express such direct disapproval was unusual and concerning. "What do you mean?" I asked. But before she could answer, my phone buzzed with a notification. Rachel pulled me into an empty conference room, glancing over her shoulder to ensure we weren't followed.
"Look,"
she began, wringing her hands nervously.
"Brooks is, well, he's exactly what you'd expect from someone who got his position through nepotism. He's textbook sexist, Sarah, and I mean textbook."
I found myself studying her face, searching for any sign that she might be exaggerating. Rachel had always been level-headed, not prone to office drama or gossip. The worry lines creasing her forehead told me this was serious. "But he's married, right?" I gestured toward the wedding ring I noticed on his finger. "Surely he can't be that bad." Rachel's bitter laugh echoed off the conference room walls.
"Oh, being married doesn't make him a decent human being. Just last week, he told Janet from accounting that she should focus on finding a husband instead of worrying about spreadsheets. Can you believe that?"
Before I could process this information, my phone started ringing. The caller ID showed Emily's daycare center. My heart immediately jumped into my throat. Any parent knows that mid-morning calls from daycare rarely bring good news. "Hello?" I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. The daycare worker's voice was apologetic but firm.
"Mrs. Andrews, I'm calling about Emily. She's running a fever of 101.2, and we need you to pick her up as soon as possible."
My stomach dropped. Of course this would happen on my first day back. "I understand completely. I'll be there as soon as I can." After hanging up, I hurried to find my supervisor, Mark, to explain the situation. I found him deep in conversation with the new CEO outside his office. My footsteps slowed involuntarily as I approached, Rachel's warnings echoing in my mind. Timothy Brooks turned at the sound of my heels on the tile floor. His eyes traveled from my shoes to my face in a way that made my skin crawl. He took his time, as if conducting an inspection rather than greeting a colleague.
Andrews, it's you.
He drawled, his tone dismissive.
Need something from him? If it's quick, go ahead.
Fighting down my discomfort, I addressed Mark directly. I'm sorry, but I need to leave early. Emily's running a fever at daycare and they need me to pick her up. Mark had barely opened his mouth to respond when Brooks let out an exaggerated sigh.
Ugh, this is why women are trouble.
He shifted his weight to one hip, crossing his arms across his chest like a disapproving teacher.
How did you think you could work here with that attitude, huh?
The contempt in his voice was unmistakable. He turned to Mark with a knowing smirk, clearly expecting support for his position. Mark gave an uncomfortable laugh, the kind that comes from not knowing how to handle an inappropriate situation.
Your kid has a fever?
Brooks continued, his voice dripping with condescension.
And you're leaving early for that? How are you even a manager?
Each word felt like a slap. The progressive, supportive environment that Mr. Richardson had cultivated seemed to evaporate in the face of Brooks's toxic attitude. Unable to contain myself, I straightened my spine and met his gaze directly. Sir, my child has a fever. I insisted, my maternal instincts overriding any fear of professional consequences. I need to be there for them. Brooks bowed his head slightly, his shoulders beginning to shake. For a moment, I thought he might be angry, but then I heard it. Laughter. Not just any laughter, but the kind of mocking, derisive sound that bullies make on playgrounds. His laughter echoed through the hallway, drawing curious and uncomfortable glances from nearby cubicles.
Oh man, women are so dramatic. I'm shocked you talk back to me. I'll give you credit for the courage. But come on, it's just a fever. They're not dying or anything. You're overreacting.
He doubled over, clutching his stomach as if this was the funniest thing he'd heard all day. Then, as if struck by a sudden thought, he straightened up, his face taking on an exaggerated expression of realization.
Oh, right,
Brooks said, snapping his fingers as if he just solved a great mystery.
You're on reduced hours, aren't you? That's ridiculous too. Everyone else works full-time, and overtime is normal around here. But you just leave early every day without a care. People like you create extra work for everyone else.
His face twisted into an ugly sneer.
Women should just quit when they get married. Then no one has to deal with the hassle. Or what? Are you that desperate for money? How pathetic, clinging to your job after marriage.
I stood there, frozen, as years of Mr. Richardson's careful work to create an inclusive workplace crumbled under Brooks's verbal assault. Even Mark, who had been maintaining his uncomfortable smirk, finally seemed to find his voice.
That's going too far,
Mark began, but Brooks cut him off with a dismissive wave and an even louder voice.
Besides,
Brooks' face was red now, spittle flying from his mouth as he worked himself into a frenzy.
What can a female sales rep do? You probably slept your way to manager position, right? But now you're just a married mom. Washed up women should stick to making coffee.
With that final barb, he spun on his heel and stalked away, leaving a wake of stunned silence behind him. The air felt thick with tension, and Mark looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. But Emily still had a fever, and no amount of workplace drama could change that fact. I apologized to Mark, gathered my things, and left to pick up my daughter, my mind spinning with everything that had just happened. Over the next few weeks, it became clear that Brooks's disregard wasn't limited to women. He seemed to have a fundamental misunderstanding of our entire business model. His obsession with cutting costs bordered on mania, and his contempt for our customer base was shocking. One particularly memorable incident occurred when I was reviewing quarterly sales reports at my desk. Brooks's voice, sharp and dismissive, cut through the usual office noise.
Workwear can be made with cheap materials,
he was saying, loud enough for everyone to hear.
These people just wear them out quickly anyway. It's not like they're fashion pieces. This stuff is for blue-collar workers.
I looked up to see him standing near my supervisor's desk, where a junior employee, Tom, had been presenting a new product proposal. Tom's face had gone pale, and his hands were trembling slightly as he clutched his presentation materials. The words hit me like a physical blow. These blue-collar workers Brooks spoke of so dismissively were the backbone of our business. Skilled professionals who trusted our products to keep them safe while they built our buildings, maintained our infrastructure, and kept our cities running. Before I could stop myself, I was on my feet. "How can you say that?" I demanded, my voice carrying across the office. "What do you think of our customers?" The moment the words left my mouth, I realized what I'd done. Tom and Mark exchanged worried glances as Brooks turned toward me, and that familiar, unpleasant smirk spreading across his face.
"Oh, you again?"
He sauntered toward my desk, each step deliberate and threatening.
"What's this, a washed-up mom lecturing the CEO?"
Despite the anger bubbling inside me, I felt a chill run down my spine. I'd seen that look before. It was the same expression he wore right before he went on one of his tirades.
Dealing with women is exhausting,"
he continued, his voice dripping with false sympathy.
"Especially married moms like you. Going through menopause? This is why women act on emotion, right?"
He looked toward Mark for approval again, receiving another of those uncomfortable smiles that had become Mark's default response to Brooks's behavior. From that day forward, I became Brooks's favorite target. His harassment took on an almost childish quality. He'd greet me in the hallways with,
"Hey there, menopause,"
and snicker to himself as he'd made the cleverest joke in the world. The whole situation felt surreal, like being transported back to high school, except the bully had actual power over my career. I did my best to stay out of his sight, but in an office our size, that was nearly impossible. The toxic atmosphere began spreading through the office like a virus. Female employees started taking different routes to the break room to avoid Brooks's comments. Male employees who weren't comfortable with his behavior began keeping their heads down, avoiding eye contact in meetings. Only Brooks seemed oblivious to the damage he was causing, strutting around the office like a peacock in his expensive suits. One day, during lunch with Rachel, I learned just how far Brooks' behavior had spread beyond our office walls. She leaned across a table, her salad forgotten, her voice barely above a whisper.
"You won't believe what happened with Stellar Industries yesterday,"
she said, glancing around the crowded cafe to ensure no one was within earshot. "Stellar Industries? Aren't they one of our biggest clients?" I asked, my fork freezing halfway to my mouth. Rachel nodded grimly.
"Mike from sales had a meeting with them yesterday. Brooks insisted on going along, and he wanted to show them how real business is done."
She made air quotes with her fingers, her expression darkening.
"Their representative turned out to be a woman. You know, Lisa Chen. She's been their head of procurement for like 15 years.
My stomach dropped.
"Oh no."
"Oh yes," Rachel continued. "The moment Brooks saw her, he said, and I'm quoting Mike here, 'What's this? Why is the coffee lady still here? We can't discuss important matters with you. Get your superior out here quick.'"
I closed my eyes, feeling a headache building. Please tell me you're joking.
"I wish. Mike said the temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. He spent the entire meeting trying to salvage the situation, but Lisa was livid. As they were leaving, she told Mike, 'What's wrong with him? Don't ever bring him here again.'"
I pushed my lunch aside, my appetite gone. How many other clients has he alienated like this? Rachel shrugged helplessly.
"Who knows? But people are talking. Our reputation in the industry is taking a hit."
The news hit me hard. Workwear Pro had always prided itself on strong client relationships, built over years of trust and mutual respect. Now Brooks was destroying that legacy, one sexist comment at a time. Despite everything, I kept working hard, trying to maintain the relationships I'd built with my clients. Then came the day of the department store meeting, an opportunity we'd been developing for over a year. The potential deal with Meridian department stores was huge, a chance to open dedicated Workwear Pro sections in their stores nationwide. This kind of retail presence could transform our company, making our products accessible to a whole new market segment. The morning of the meeting, I stood in front of my closet, carefully selecting my navy blue suit, the one I considered my lucky outfit. As I adjusted my collar in the mirror, my husband James appeared behind me.
"You've got this, Sarah," he said, squeezing my shoulders. "You've been preparing for this meeting for months."
I met his eyes in the mirror. Brooks will be there. James's expression tightened. He'd heard all about Brooks's behavior, had seen me come home fighting tears more than once.
Don't let him get in your head. This is your project. You've done all the work.
I took a deep breath, straightening my spine. You're right. I can't let him ruin this opportunity for the company. But as I drove to Meridian's corporate headquarters, anxiety gnawed at my stomach. Our client was Jennifer Martinez, a brilliant businesswoman who'd revolutionized Meridian's approach to specialty retail. She was exactly the kind of professional Brooks loved to belittle. The Meridian corporate office lobby was all glass and chrome, reflecting the morning sunlight in dazzling patterns. A male assistant greeted us and led us to the conference room, my heels clicking against the marble floor in perfect sync with my racing heartbeat. Brooks walked beside me, already wearing that smug expression I'd grown to dread. Jennifer Martinez was waiting for us, impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit, her dark hair swept back in a professional updo. She stood as we entered, extending her hand with a warm smile.
CEO Brooks, Miss Andrews, it's an honor to meet you. Looking forward to our discussion today,
she said, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who'd earned her position through years of hard work. I stepped forward, returning her smile. The honor is ours. Thank you for this opportunity. Looking forward to working with you. But before I could launch into our carefully prepared presentation, Brooks's dismissive voice cut through the professional atmosphere like a rusty knife.
Hey, why are you being so polite to the coffee lady? You're talking to the wrong person.
He looked around the room as if expecting to find someone else hiding behind the potted plants. My heart sank. I could feel the temperature in the room plummet, just as Rachel had described from the Stellar Industries incident. Jennifer's professional smile froze in place, but her eyes hardened.
Excuse me, she said, her tone glacial, but I've been handling all communications with your company. I'll be managing this project as well.
Brooks raised his eyebrows, a theatrical expression of surprise crossing his face.
Oh, is that right?
He let out a grating laugh that made me want to sink through the floor.
Strong women aren't very attractive, you know. So you're a female sales rep like this one? My, that must be quite difficult,
I watched in horror as he leered at Jennifer, his eyes traveling up and down her form in that same inappropriate way he looked at me on my first day back. Jennifer's jaw tightened, but she maintained her composure with admirable professionalism. As I began walking through our proposal, the results of countless hours of market research, customer surveys, and careful planning, Brooks grew increasingly agitated. He shifted in his chair, making dismissive noises, until finally he couldn't contain himself anymore.
What's with this ridiculous proposal?
He burst out, slamming his hand on the conference table.
Go make something better, you useless...
He caught himself, seeming to remember we were in front of a client.
Excuse us. We'll come back with something different. See, women just don't understand business.
Jennifer's expression said it all. She sat back in her chair, arms crossed, the kind of pose that screamed meeting over in any language. Though she maintained her professional demeanor, saying they would consider our proposal, I knew in my gut that the deal was dead. Sure enough, a week later, we received the official rejection email. Reading it at my desk, I felt a mix of anger and despair. A year of work, countless hours of preparation, all destroyed in a single meeting because of one man's toxic attitude. The sound of approaching footsteps made me look up. Brooks was storming toward my desk, his face purple with rage.
Hey, you! Look what you've done!
He shouted, loud enough to make several nearby employees jump. I forced myself to remain calm. What do you mean, sir?
Thanks to you, we lost the department store deal.
Spittle flew from his mouth as he gestured wildly with the rejection email printout. Around us, other employees had stopped pretending to work, watching the scene unfold with a mixture of horror and sympathy. Some were shaking their heads, clearly seeing the injustice of his accusations.
It's because you brought such half-baked proposal,
Brooks continued ranting, his face growing redder by the second.
And their rep was just another useless coffee lady. You people are impossible to work with.
The unfairness of it all hit me like a physical blow. This proposal wasn't just my work. It represented the collective effort of our entire team. Countless late nights, endless revisions, input from every department. And here he was, dismissing it all because of his own prejudices. Something inside me snapped. The weight of every sexist comment, every dismissive gesture, every humiliation I'd endured came crashing down at once. I rose from my chair, meeting his gaze directly. "That proposal," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "was developed by all employees over a year. With all due respect, you have no right to call it half-baked. And what does gender have to do with anything? Sex doesn't matter in business." Brooks' face contorted with rage.
Ugh, this is why women...
He ran his hands through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up in his agitation.
Are you saying this failed negotiation was my fault?
The silence in the office was deafening. Everyone knew the truth. They'd all heard about his behavior in the meeting. Some of my colleagues were nodding slightly, though they didn't dare speak up. But Brooks wasn't finished. His voice took on a mocking, sing-song quality that made my skin crawl.
Sex doesn't matter? Don't be stupid. Women get coffee, men become executives. That's how it's always been. Get it?
He leaned over my desk, invading my personal space.
Besides, like I said before, washed up married moms like you are just a burden on the company. Maybe if you were pretty, it'd be different, but, you know.
His laughter echoed through the silent office.
You can't even make coffee right. I've overlooked it until now, but after losing this huge opportunity for the company, you're useless to me. You're fired. F-I-R-E-D. Fired.
He was so close, I could smell his morning coffee on his breath. That smug, self-satisfied smirk was plastered across his face, as if he'd just delivered the cleverest speech in history. In that moment, I thought of Mr. Richardson, of all he'd built, of how this man was destroying it piece by piece. I thought of my daughter, Emily, of the world she grew up in if men like Brooks continued to hold positions of power. I thought of every woman who'd ever been told to know her place. I felt a strange calm settle over me, the kind that comes with absolute certainty. Is that so? My voice was quiet but clear, carrying across the silent office. Fine. I don't want to work at a company run by someone like you anyway. I'll quit on my own. I'm done with this place. I grabbed my purse and my family photo from my desk, leaving everything else behind. As I walked toward the elevator, head held high, I could feel everyone's eyes on me. Several women were wiping away tears. A few of my male colleagues looked ashamed, though whether of Brooks's behavior or their own silence, I couldn't tell. The drive home was a blur. When I walked through my front door, James took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. I collapsed into his arms, finally letting the tears flow. That evening, after putting Emily to bed, I told James everything that had happened. He listened intently, his jaw tightening as I described Brooks's final tirade.
You've been through so much, Sarah,
he said softly, pulling me close.
Why don't you take some time off? You deserve a break.
For the first time in years, I found myself with unlimited free time. Following James's advice, I decided to focus on being present with Emily. It was strange at first. No emails to check, no client calls to return, no meetings to prepare for. Just me and my daughter. Discovering the simple pleasures of unstructured days together. One sunny morning, Emily tugged at my sleeve during breakfast.
Mommy, can we go to the park?
I looked at the clock. 10:30 a.m. At this time, I would normally be deep in a sales meeting or reviewing quarterly reports. The realization hit me. I could actually say yes. Of course we can, sweetie, I replied, smiling at her delighted squeal. The local park was peaceful at this hour, with only a few other children playing. Emily made a beeline for the sandbox, where another little girl was already building an elaborate castle. As I settled onto a nearby bench, I noticed an elegant older woman watching the children play. There was something familiar about her, but I couldn't quite place it. She caught me looking and smiled, making her way over to my bench. "Hello," she said warmly. "Thank you for letting your child play with my grandchild." The moment she spoke, I recognized her. Catherine Wells, CEO of P&S Company, our main competitor. My heart skipped a beat.
I took the day off to bring my grandchild to the park, she continued, settling beside me.
Oh, not my child, my grandchild. Usually at this time, there aren't many other children, so they play alone and seem a bit lonely. But today, what luck. You and your child are here, and they have a friend. They're so excited. She paused, studying my face.
Do you work somewhere?
No, I replied, wondering if I should mention my previous employment. I was working until recently. I hesitated before adding, "Excuse me, but aren't you the CEO of PNS Company?" Her eyes widened in surprise.
Oh, you know who I am?
She looked flustered, probably not expecting to be recognized during her grandmother duties.
Have we met somewhere before?
Actually, I said, taking a deep breath, I worked in sales at Workwear Pro until recently.
Oh, Workwear Pro.
Her expression shifted from surprise to recognition.
My goodness, you were with our competitor. That's why you knew me.
Something about her kind, grandmotherly presence broke down my carefully constructed walls. Before I knew it, I was telling her everything. The supportive environment under Mr. Richardson, Brooke's arrival, the systematic destruction of everything we built, the constant harassment, and finally my dramatic departure. As I spoke, tears I thought I'd finished shedding began falling again. Catherine listened intently, occasionally nodding or shaking her head, her face showing genuine concern.
I see. So that's what happened,
she said softly when I finished.
Sarah, you've really been through a lot. Thank you for working so hard for our industry for so long.
She placed a comforting hand on my shoulder.
You know, I'd heard Workwear Pro had an excellent female sales rep, so that was you.
Her warm, maternal presence was so different from Brooks's toxic masculinity that I found myself crying harder. She rubbed my back gently, offering quiet words of understanding. Our children, noticing my tears, abandoned their sandcastle and came running over. Emily climbed into my lap, her small hands patting my cheek.
Mommy sad?
She asked, her bottom lip trembling in sympathy. I hugged her close, managing a watery smile. No, sweetie, Mommy's okay now. After I calmed down and the children returned to their play, Catherine turned to me with an unexpected gleam in her eye.
Sarah,
she said, her tone shifting from comforting to businesslike.
I have a proposal for you.
I looked at Catherine, puzzled by her sudden change in demeanor. A proposal?
Would you like to work with us?
She asked directly, her eyes twinkling.
PNS could use someone with your experience and dedication.
My heart skipped a beat, but anxiety quickly followed. I don't know, with Emily being so young. Catherine held up her hand, smiling.
Before you say no, let me tell you about PNS. We have many working moms like you. We have an on-site daycare facility that I helped establish 15 years ago.
She gestured toward her granddaughter in the sandbox.
I even leave my grandchild there. The caregivers are wonderful, and the children love it.
I watched Emily playing happily with Catherine's granddaughter, considering the possibility.
Really? Absolutely. You know, Sarah, I started PNS 40 years ago when women in this industry were even rarer than they are now. I vowed to create a company where everyone could thrive, regardless of gender or family status.
She leaned forward, her expression serious.
We need leaders like you, people who understand both the technical aspects of our industry and the human elements.
2 weeks later, I walked into PNS's headquarters for my first day as their new department manager. The contrast with Workwear Pro was immediately apparent. The office buzzed with diverse energy, women and men working together as equals, family photos proudly displayed on desks, and a general atmosphere of professional respect. My new team included several working mothers, and I quickly discovered that Catherine hadn't been exaggerating about the support systems in place. The on-site daycare was a game changer. Knowing Emily was just a few floors away eased my working mother anxiety significantly. During my first team meeting, I brought up an idea I'd been sitting on for years: a dedicated Workwear for Women line. At Workwear Pro, Brooks would have dismissed it immediately. But here, my team's eyes lit up.
That's brilliant,
exclaimed Maria, one of our product developers.
The number of women in the trades have been increasing steadily, but most workwear is still designed for men's bodies.
We dove into the project with enthusiasm, conducting focus groups and gathering input from women across various industries. We learned about their specific needs: better fit through the hips, adjustable waistbands that actually worked, practical pocket placement for women's proportions. The response when we launched the line exceeded our wildest expectations. Orders flooded in, and social media buzzed with positive reviews from women in trades.
Finally, work pants that fit properly.
No more rolling up sleeves that are too long.
I can actually use the pockets without everything falling out.
The success of the women's line led to an unexpected breakthrough. Parents started asking if we could make matching workwear for their children. It started as a cute photo opportunity, kids wanting to dress like their working parents, but quickly evolved into a full children's line that combined durability with style. One morning, my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer.
Good, you answered. Hey, is this Andrews?
The voice was familiar, though the tone was completely different from what I remembered. Yes, this is Andrews, I replied carefully, recognizing Brooks's voice. CEO Brooks, right? What do you want with an employee you fired?
Yeah, it's me.
Brooks's voice cracked with desperation.
Listen, please, come back to our company.
I almost dropped my phone in shock. What? Are you serious?
Since you left, our performance has been terrible.
His voice took on a whining quality I'd never heard before.
You're at P&S now, right? I hear they're doing amazingly well. Please, I was wrong. Come back and do the same for us. I'm begging you.
I could hear the tears in his voice, so different from his usual arrogant tone. It was almost comical, the mighty CEO reduced to begging the coffee lady to return. A laugh bubbled up from deep inside me. My, things must be rough. I've been following the news. How are you holding up? And indeed, I had been following Workwear Pro's decline. Brooks's obsession with cost-cutting had led to a dramatic drop in product quality. The company that had once been known for its superior workwear was now mass-producing cheap uniforms that fell apart after a few washes. Their reputation for functionality, built over decades, had been destroyed in months. Clients were fleeing in droves, and employee morale had hit rock bottom. I'd heard through the grapevine that salaries had been cut, and longtime employees were being pressured into voluntary resignation.
What? You know?
Brooks's voice rose an octave.
Then all the more reason to come back. You wouldn't return evil for good, right?
I let his words hang in the air for a moment. Of course not. I would never return evil for good.
Then?
Hope crept into his voice. But CEO Brooks. I cut him off, my tone firm but calm. You never showed me any good to return, only evil. Have you reflected on your behavior? Your horrible sexism? Are you aware that not a single employee supported you? The only response was sniffling on the other end of the line. I continued, saying everything I'd wish I could say during those months of harassment. I will never return to a company where you're in charge. I'm receiving real support here, an environment that values employees like me. I won't betray this company's trust. Goodbye.
Wait, please, we're not done talking.
His voice had lost all traces of its former authority, reduced to pure desperation. I ended the call and blocked his number, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. That chapter of my life was truly over. Later that week, I had a lunch meeting with Jennifer Martinez from Meridian Department Stores. Yes, the same representative from that disastrous meeting with Brooks. She greeted me with a warm smile, all traces of her previous frost gone. Miss Andrews, it's an honor to meet you again. The meeting proceeded smoothly, worlds away from that previous encounter. Jennifer had been following P&S's success with our women's workwear line, and she was interested in bringing it to Meridian stores. Your reputation for quality and innovation precedes you, she said, reviewing our proposal. And I have to say, the way you've transformed the market's approach to women's workwear is impressive. As we wrapped up the meeting, Jennifer signed the contract that would bring P&S products to Meridian department stores nationwide. The deal I'd worked so hard for at Workwear Pro was finally happening, just not how I'd originally imagined. A few days later, I met Rachel for lunch at our old favorite cafe. She'd been keeping me updated on the aftermath at Workwear Pro, but today she had particularly interesting news.
You won't believe what I found out,
she said, stirring her coffee thoughtfully.
Remember how sudden it was when Brooks became CEO? Turns out there's quite a story there.
I leaned forward, intrigued. What do you mean?
Well, according to what I heard from Mr. Richardson's secretary, he never actually intended to hand over leadership to Brooks.
Rachel lowered her voice, though we were far from any Workwear Pro employees.
Brooks basically forced his way in, riding on his position as son-in-law and his supposed MBA from some prestigious university.
But Mr. Richardson agreed to it? I asked, remembering how out of character that had seemed. Rachel shook her head.
Not exactly. Brooks was incredibly persistent, constantly pushing and making grand promises about his vision for the company. Mr. Richardson was put in an awkward position. How do you firmly reject your son-in-law without causing family drama? So he agreed to a 1-year trial period.
A trial period? I took a sip of my tea, thinking back to Brooks's increasingly erratic behavior. I'm guessing that didn't end well.
You could say that again,
Rachel replied with a grim smile.
The board just voted him out last week. The company's performance was terrible. Employee turnover was through the roof, and then there was the final straw.
She paused dramatically, and I raised an eyebrow. Which was?
His wife found out how he'd been treating female employees. Apparently, she had no idea. He'd been hiding his behavior at work, but at home, he'd been just as sexist. When everything came to life, she filed for divorce.
I sat back processing this information. So he's gone? Completely gone?
Rachel nodded. Fired and divorced in the same week. Talk about karma.
As I drove home that evening, I thought about everything that had happened. The toxic environment at Workwear Pro had been horrible to endure, but it had led me to PNS, where I could truly make a difference. Our women's workwear line had sparked an industry-wide conversation about inclusivity in industrial clothing. Our companies were following our lead, launching their own women-focused lines. The market was finally recognizing what I'd known all along, that women in trades deserve the same quality and consideration as their male counterparts. The parent-child matching workwear sets had an unexpected impact too. We started receiving photos from families, mothers in construction gear posing proudly with their similarly dressed daughters, female mechanics teaching their children about tools while wearing matching coveralls. Each image challenged old stereotypes about who could work in trades. Walking into my office at PNS the next morning, I passed the on-site daycare where Emily was happily playing with her friends. Through the window, I could see Catherine reading a story to a group of children, her CEO persona completely replaced by doting grandmother mode. I thought about my journey, from being dismissed as the coffee lady to helping reshape an entire industry's approach to women's workwear. The path hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Men and women should be able to live as equals. True equality doesn't come from tearing others down, but from building environments where everyone can thrive. Being cruel to others will always come back to hurt you. Brooks had learned that lesson the hard way. As for me, I had found my place in a company that valued both my professional expertise and my role as a mother. I was making a difference, not just for myself, but for all the women who would come after me. Looking at the family photos on my desk, James beaming proudly, Emily grinning with her toy tool set, I smiled. Sometimes, the worst experiences lead us to exactly where we need to be. I want to live valuing those around me and the present moment. After all, that's how real change happens. One person, one decision, one moment at a time.